Hello, potential backers and friends. This is Jason Duff with Heroes and Hardships talking about combat. I wanted to run through a combat scenario with you just so you can get an idea of how it works. And I think this is a good opportunity to go through that and show you exactly how it works in a fairly simple scenario. Here I have our two protagonists, Sir John and Sir Jane, against the bad guy, aptly named. And let's get started. You see on the left side here, this is roll 20. Easy to show you this way. If you look at Sir Jane, Sir John, and bad guy under turn order here, you will see a 0.22, 0.7, 0.16. What does that mean? So this is presuming I rolled initiative already. Initiative is a really interesting thing in Heroes and Hardships. The initiative this rolled like a normal game is you roll some stat and you get some number and that the highest number goes first. We do that, but it gets a little deeper than that. So in this case, Sir Jane rolled a 22. This would be a senses reactions skill check, and so she got a 22, Sir John got a 17, and the bad guy got a 16. Well, what's a 0? Well, this is really the most interesting thing about Heroes and Hardships, and that's the action point system. The action point system is a way to track actions and movement and how long those actions take without having rounds. There's no rounds in Heroes and Hardships at all. Instead, you will use action points, and each action you do costs a certain amount of action points. When you use that, you move along the combat track. Whoever is highest on the combat track goes last. Whoever is the lowest on the combat track goes first. So if you spend your action points, or not your any action points, on things that are lower, quicker actions, then you're going to go more. People who use very high action point actions, very long techniques, that is going to take longer, and you're going to be slower, and you're going to act less. So in combat, it is imperative to understand where you are on the combat track and when you're going to act and how fast you're going to act compared to someone else. Okay? And we'll see that as we go along. So the first person to act is Sir Jane. And she has her bow out already, we'll presume, and she's going to make a shot at the bad guy. And she rolls a 22. This is a bow's dexterity skill check. And we figure the hit location, and we check what the digit is on the rightmost digit of your roll, and a 2 is an arm. Okay, that is a right arm hit. There is a hit location table that you will see in the game, and it shows you exactly what numbers correlate to what body part. A standard attack like this is 3 AP, so I will take Sir Jane and move her up the combat track to 3, which means she is now the lowest on the combat track, and she is would be the last one to act. So let's see if this hit. So she rolled a 22. The next thing we need to do is figure out what the distance is between her and her target. And we're doing in hexes here. So she is 6 hexes away from the bad guy. Her bow's range is 6. And I'm not going to go into exactly how you calculate range penalties and such, but just know that 6, that hex range for her is medium range, and medium range is 2 range dice. And range dice are penalty dice that when you roll, increase the difficulty of your attack. Penalty dice can explode, so it can make hitting difficult. In a ranged attack, you add those penalty dice to the base defense of the target, which would be the bad guy. The bad guy's base defense is 12, and the range dice are rolled, and there's a 6 and a 7. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 12 to 13, which is a 25. Okay? 25 is the defensive value of this attack. It's called the total defense value, TDV. The base defense value is her attack of 22. You always subtract the base defense value from the base attack value. If that number is negative, then the attack has missed. So we are going to subtract 25 from 22, which is -3. Therefore, the attack missed. The next act is Sir John. And Sir John is 6 hexes away from the bad guy. Sir John has only melee weapons. He has those melee weapons out. And so he needs to get to the bad guy. The way movement works, it's an action like anything else. He could walk, but you can only spend up to 5 AP in a turn. So he chooses a different action called Run. Run allows you to run a multiple of your speed score. So typically with a speed score 1, you would run up to double your speed score for the action points you spend. So if I spend 5 action points and I run, I can move 10 hexes. So he has a speed score of 1 and he's 6 away. So I spend 3 action points to move 6 hexes with a run. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Sir John has closed the distance and is now next to the bad guy. So running for that many is half the hexes you move. So Sir John now has 3 AP spent. Running does inflict a penalty to attacks and other people's attacks against you. So if you run, you suffer a pre-roll modifier of a -3, and any attacks to you also get a -3 modifier. All that happens until you act again. So I'll just mark that with a pink dot so we know he ran his last turn. The bad guy's turn finally, and he decides to attack. He's going to just do a normal attack for 3 AP. So what I'm going to do is update the turn tracker for his 3 AP. Now everybody has 3 AP. Now let's finish his attack. He is going to roll his sword skill, which is sword and dexterity, for a sword skill check. As you can see in the box, he rolls a 20. His 20 is his base attack value. However, he needs to subtract 3 from that value because Sir John was running, which inflicts a penalty on attacks against him and his attacks against others. So his total is a 17. Now, Sir John gets to make a defensive action, which are out of turn actions. They always are. So Sir John needs to decide what to do. The first thing he considers is his base defense. His base defense is 10, so his base defense is lower than the attack value of 17. Therefore, he would be hit if he just uses base defense. You can use your base defense if your base defense is higher than the attacker's result, or it is low enough for the attacker's result that you do not suffer damage, or not much damage. So Sir John knows he should not use his base defense because that's going to be 7 levels of success. That would be his 10 minus 7, or I'm sorry, 17 minus 10. So that would be 7. So he doesn't want to do that. So he is going to actually use a defensive action to block or do something else for this attack. Sir John decides to actually block with his shield. So he makes a skill check based on shields. Dexterity shields are that skill check. So he makes that skill check and he ends up rolling a 17. However, shields do give a pre-roll modifier in their defense, and +2 in this case, so he would have a 19 instead of a 17. 19 is higher than the 17 attack, so he is able to block the attack. Defensive actions do cost AP. So a block action costs 1 AP. So Sir John is going to go up in AP. So if you're surrounded or being attacked a lot of people and you use active defenses, you're going to slow yourself in the combat. So now we have 2 combatants with the same AP score. They're the same on the combat track. How do we break ties? Well, we break ties by initiative. So Sir Jane has an initiative of 22 and the bad guy has an initiative of 16. Therefore, Sir Jane goes first. Sir Jane once again decides to attack with a standard attack. Not wanting to spend AP on any other action, she simply draws and shoots. Bows are a weapon that have the quality no reload, which does not force you to do any reload actions with those weapons. It's all incorporated in the action itself. So she shoots with AP 3, and I'll add that to her total, and that brings her up to 6 AP. And as you see, she rolled a 29. She must have had some exploding dice in there. So she hits, she doesn't necessarily hit the bad guy. Now we need to check out the range band. She's still 6 away. We know that that's medium range, and we know that is 2 range dice. The bad guy's base defense is 12, which we'll have to take that into effect too. Remember, it's 12 plus the 2 range dice. Here, I've rolled the 2 dice, a 5 and a 6 for an 11. So the range dice total is an 11, and then we add the bad guy's base defense of 12 for a total of 23. Sir Jane's attack was a 29, so if we subtract 23, we get a 6, and that's a hit. The rightmost digit of her base attack value was a 9, so that hits the bad guy in the leg. Now that we know that the blow was hit and where it hit, the first thing we do is look at the weapon damage on Sir Jane's bow, and that's a 3. So we add that 3 to the levels of success, which was 6, so now we have a total of 9. Unfortunately, Sir Jane hit the bad guy in the leg. When you're hit in the legs or the arms, you automatically reduce the damage by 3, so now she's back down to 6. The bad guy doesn't have any armor on his legs, so we're a total of 6 for the total success value. The next thing we do is we compare the total success value to a few characteristics on the bad guy. The first is his wound level. If the total success value is greater than his wound level, he takes a wound. In this case, his wound level is 10, so he doesn't take a wound. The other thing that we look at is his injury level. Injury levels are half the wound level rounded down. So in this case, his injury level is 5. A total success value of 6 is 1 greater than the 5, so he takes an injury. Injuries give the injured a -3 pre-roll modifier for the rest of the combat. Injuries aren't as damaging as wounds, and they disappear after combat is over. Remember, pre-roll modifiers affect the roll before anything is hit, so it directly impacts being hit or not necessarily the damage afterwards. We'll represent an injury on the bad guy by doing this, using a bubble with a 1. If we look at the combat track, the lowest person on the combat track is the bad guy with 3, so he goes next. He decides to make a standard attack against Sir John, so we're going to add 3 to his action points score, bringing him up to 6. The bad guy makes a swords attack against Sir John. However, he rolls a 15. 15 is now updated because of his injury for -3. That brings him to 12. Sir John still has the effects of running his last turn, so that's a -3 again for 9. So the bad guy's total base success value is currently 9. Now Sir John determines if he needs to perform an active defense. He looks at his base defense, which is 10. Since the bad guy's attack was only 9, and it doesn't meet 10 or go over 10, then he does not have to actively defend. The attack just misses automatically. This helps save Sir John's AP to use later. Sir John looks at the AP and he has 4 AP. This is where it's important to understand all the AP at the table, which should always be shown to everyone at all times. AP is never hidden. Sir John sees that the bad guy has AP of 6. Therefore, he wonders if there is something he can do between the time he would attack at 6 and his current AP of 4. Luckily, he knows about the aim action. The aim action costs 1 through 5 AP. You choose. He chooses the 1 AP version and gives himself 1 benefit on his next attack versus the bad guy. A benefit increases your rolled dice by 1. Since he aimed, I'm going to increase his AP by 1. To mark his aim, we'll use a blue dot. Since he made another action, his run benefits and penalties go away. He's no longer suffering the effects of running. Sir John now attacks using a standard attack. It brings his AP up to 8. Realize when you go from a lower AP to APs higher than other people in the combat, they typically do not get to interrupt you. There's only very certain and specific instances with the interrupt action where that can occur. Now, Sir John makes his sword skill check. He's going to add another rolled dice because of the benefit from aiming. As you see, he made a good attack and rolled a 32. That's a pretty high roll. Now we can remove his bubble from aiming. He no longer has any pre-roll modifiers from running, or he is not injured, so 32 is what it's going to be. The bad guy knows he's in trouble, so he tries to make a dodge roll to get out of the way. Dodges cost 1 AP and is a defensive action, so we're going to increase his AP by 1. Now he's at 7. The bad guy rolled a 20 on his dodge, but he needs to do a -3 to that 20 because he's injured. So now he's actually at 17. Now, you will subtract 17 from 32. 32 was Sir John's attack, and 17 was the bad guy's total defensive value. And now we get a total of 15. Now that we have a successful hit with 15 levels of success, we add the damage to Sir John's weapon, which is 4, which that brings us to a total success value of 19. The 32 that he rolled earlier is an arm hit, so unfortunately we have to subtract 3. That brings us down to 16 for a total success value. But now, as we did earlier, we have to compare the attack to the bad guy's wound level and potentially injury level. His wound level is 10, and 16 is higher than 10, so he takes a wound. If the attack was double the bad guy's wound level, or in this case a 20, it would be a mortality threshold. If attack is higher than a mortality threshold, the defender needs to make a death roll immediately. Since the bad guy took a wound, the first thing we're going to do is mark a permanent wound for the bad guy. This is more important for player characters, but sometimes the GM might do it for NPCs as well. Wounds can last forever and can get converted into permanent penalties to attributes if healing goes awry. If this was a PC, I would mark it down the bad guy has a 16 levels of success wound to his arm. The character sheets on Roll20 do have this option for you to put this information in, so it's very handy to keep track of. For the rest of the combat, besides having a permanent wound, there's something called a wound hardship. Wound hardships are penalty dice that affect the bad guy through the rest of the combat. This will increase his difficulty by 1 penalty dice, a d10 that explodes. To mark this, I'll give him a red bubble with a 1. Simulating shock and awe and the loss of blood is important in Heroes and Hardships. It does this, and it also helps for combats not to last overly long and get bogged down. So the next thing the bad guy has to do is make a falter roll. Anytime you take a wound, you usually take a falter roll as well. Falter rolls are stamina skill checks with all penalties, whereas death rolls have no penalties included. So if you have wounds and injuries and you make a death roll, they do not affect your roll. However, if you make a falter roll, any wounds or injuries always affect the roll and increases the difficulty. The target numbers of death rolls and falter rolls is always the levels of success of the wound that was bestowed upon you. The Naga makes a stamina roll and gets a 21. However, he must subtract 3 right away for his injury, bringing him to 18. He then makes a wound hardship roll, which is included in the difficulty, and he only gets a 1. He's very lucky. That brings him to 17. The original total success value was a 16, so he's just made it just barely and stays afloat. Death rolls and falter rolls do not cause AP spins. They're just what happens when you get injured. Looking at the combat track, now that combat is resolved, Sir Jane is up next. Sir Jane, seeing that she has some time, aims once. We'll mark that with a blue bubble on Sir Jane and increase her AP by 1. This brings her into a tie with the bad guy, but her AP is higher, so she's going to go first. Sir Jane continues to use a standard attack for only 3 AP, but this time she's going to add a benefit to her attack from her aim. This should give her a better chance of landing a very solid blow on the bad guy, who is already injured. We'll add 3 to her APs. That brings her to 10, and we'll remove her aim. Now we'll make her attack. She makes a good roll of a 30 with that benefit. Now she needs to roll 2 range dice because she's still in medium range, and add that to the bad guy's base defense. Lucky for Sir Jane, only a 5 was rolled on the 2 range dice. You would add that to his base defense of 12, so that's a total of 17. Now, we're going to subtract the 17 from the 30, giving Sir Jane 7. Going to subtract 17 from 30, which equals 13. Now we're going to add Sir Jane's damage on her bow, which is 3. Her attack was a 30, so the 0 on the rightmost digit is a headshot. That increases the damage by 5. That gives her a total success value of 21. 21 is higher than the bad guy's mortality threshold. He has no armor. If it's higher than his mortality threshold, which is double his wound level, he instantly makes a death roll like we talked about before. Death rolls are resilience skill checks, and as I mentioned before, they do not incur penalties from wound, hardships, or injuries. And the baseline rule is to add a wound level to the roll. So the bad guy will make a resilience roll and add his wound level. His target number is the total success value of the attack. The bad guy makes a roll and only gets a total of 19, even with the plus 10 from his wound level. The original damage was 21, so that's lower than his death roll. That means he dies immediately. Sir John and Sir Jane have won the day, and this is a basic combat in Heroes and Hardships. I hope it was helpful to you, and I wish you a good day. Thank you.